I'm Lucille. Standing outside the vintage bistro, the soft glow of the amber light spills onto the wet sidewalk, creating a warm rectangle. Inside, I can see my mother's table in the center of the room, just as I expected. There are 7 people sitting around it, and at the very edge, a chair that doesn't quite fit with the rest, clearly an afterthought. It's meant for me, but I've decided it's time to stop trying to fit into that seat. I remember the moment I first saw the text from my mother on the morning of her 67th birthday. I was sitting at the kitchen table, working on a marketing campaign for my job at Health Horizon. My husband, Ethan, was standing by the window, sipping his coffee and finishing a call with his manager, Jake, about his chain of 5 restaurants. The text read, "Oops, we forgot your seat at dinner tonight." So embarrassing. You know how these things get. I read it 3 times, not because I was hurt, but because I wanted to remember every word. Ethan looked at the text and simply asked, "Tell me what time." Before the text arrived, it was a typical Saturday morning. The house was quiet, and the late October light filtered through the window in thin strips, landing on my laptop. I was in the middle of writing a tagline for a new heart health campaign, debating if your life's engine was too obvious. Mrs. Thompson, an 82-year-old neighbor who lived next door, knocked on the kitchen door. She'd been struggling with her mailbox latch for the 4 years we'd lived on Elmwood Lane. I'd started bringing her a cup of coffee on weekend mornings, partly out of kindness and partly because I knew she appreciated it. "You're spoiling me," she said, taking the mug with both hands. When I came back inside, I saw the text again. The use of "we" made me think of my sister-in-law, Olivia. She'd called my mother 4 times in the past 12 days. My brother, Ryan, had mentioned it casually, not realizing how significant it was. Just before this birthday dinner that had been planned without a seat for me. I typed "no problem" and sent the message. Then I sat at the table, thinking about a conversation I'd had with a colleague once. She'd said that the hardest seats to leave are the ones we were never comfortable in. At that time, I didn't really understand, but now it made perfect sense. I started to recall past memories. There was my graduation in May 2012 in Savannah. I'd worked hard to pay for most of my communication degree, working summers at a beachfront hotel and 1 long semester as a campus tour guide. My mother and Ryan were in the crowd. Ryan had driven 4 hours from Atlanta, and my mother made sure everyone knew it. After the ceremony, when I found them near the fountain, my mother was taking pictures of Ryan. She only noticed me later and said, "Oh, there you are. Get in here with Ryan." So, the graduation photo was mostly of Ryan. On the drive home, my mother said Ryan didn't have to come. He had a big project at work. She thought it was a great show of love, but I knew that in her eyes, his 4-hour drive outweighed my 4-year effort. Then there was Christmas at my mother's house on Pinecrest Drive. Ryan and Olivia had the seats closest to my mother, right in the center of the conversation about Ryan's law firm's expansion and Olivia's sister's new business. My mother poured wine for them first, and the bottle never quite reached me. I was sitting at the extension table, the one that wobbled on the left side. I'd eaten Christmas dinner there for 5 years without saying a word. After dinner, I cleared the plates from my end of the table, and no one even noticed. I told Ethan about all these memories. He listened quietly, as he always did. When I finished, he asked, "Do you want to go?" I said yes, not out of anger, but because I knew it was time. He then told me that the Vintage Bistro was one of his restaurants, and Jake managed it on Saturdays. He didn't think my mother knew. I went upstairs to get dressed. I chose a deep purple dress, the one I'd worn to a big industry event 2 years ago when I'd presented a successful rebranding. It made me feel confident. Ethan was in the bedroom doorway, tying his tie. He was always so focused on small tasks. We left the house at 6:20. The evening had turned cool, and I could smell the wet leaves and the sweet scent of the neighbor's magnolia tree through the cracked window. As we drove, I thought about Olivia. She'd married Ryan 9 years ago and had been very good at cultivating a relationship with my mother. She made weekly calls and always remembered my mother's preferences, something I'd never quite managed with my busy work schedule. I realized that in those 4 phone calls, Olivia must have said something about the dinner, the guest list, and the seating. But at the end of the day, it was my mother who sent the text. She was the one who made the decision. When we reached the Vintage Bistro, we stopped on the sidewalk about 20 feet from the entrance. The rain was light, more like a mist. Through the large, unobstructed window, I could see the interior laid out like a stage. My mother's table was in the center, as expected. Ryan was on my mother's right, his usual position as the firstborn. Olivia was beside him, holding court. There were also 2 of my mother's old friends from the local library, a cousin from Charleston, and Aunt Mildred at the far end, with her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. I looked at the chair meant for me, the one that stood out with its different upholstery and slightly outward angle. Then I saw Olivia, with one hand raised, making a point. The whole table was watching her, and my mother was smiling that smile she reserved for people she wanted to impress. I'd spent so many years trying to earn that smile. I remembered my wedding in June 2016 at the Savannah Country Club. Ethan's mother had offered the venue, and it seemed rude to refuse. There were 250 guests, and the outdoor ceremony was dry thanks to good weather. My mother spent most of the reception sitting with Ryan and Olivia. When the band played the first song Ethan and I danced to, I looked for her. I found her at a corner table, leaning towards Olivia, laughing. When the photographer asked if I wanted a photo with my mother before people left, I said yes. But by the time we looked for her, she'd gone outside with Ryan and Olivia. We took the photo the next day at her kitchen table, but it wasn't the same. There was no photo of us from the wedding itself. I almost asked Ethan to keep driving. We could have gone somewhere quiet, just the 2 of us. But then Olivia said something, and the whole table laughed. My mother put her hand on Olivia's arm, just like she used to do to me when I was a child. And I finally understood. It wasn't that my mother hated me. There was no malice. It was just that she'd unconsciously decided where her attention would go. Ryan had been there first, and the situation had never changed. It was a habit, not cruelty. Okay, I said to Ethan. He opened the door, and we walked in. The smell of rosemary and grilled meat filled the air. Jake was at the host stand. When he saw Ethan, his posture straightened slightly. He came around to greet us. Olivia saw us first. I watched her eyes widen as she realized what was happening. Ryan followed a few seconds later, mid-story, and his voice trailed off. My mother looked up last. She let out a little "oh" of surprise, and then quickly put on a social smile. "Lucille, you came after all," she said warmly. Jake leaned towards Ethan and said in a low voice, "We have the private dining room available this evening if you'd prefer." "Sir, shall I remove their table? We could arrange something more comfortable for." I looked at my mother. Her social smile had faded, and there was a look of uncertainty on her face. I turned to Jake and said, "No, please. It's my mother's birthday. Let them enjoy their evening." Jake led us to the private room. It was smaller than the main dining room, with a round table and warm, soft lighting. Ethan pulled out my chair, and I sat down. A server appeared immediately, pouring water and placing menus. We sat in silence for a moment. Ethan reached across the table and put his hand over mine. I ordered the lamb, and Ethan ordered the duck. We shared a bottle of wine recommended by the sommelier. We talked about my marketing campaign, a trip we wanted to take to the mountains, and Mrs. Thompson's mailbox latch. Ethan said he'd look into getting a new latch for her. I could hear Aunt Mildred's voice from the main dining room. She was telling a couple at the next table, "Oh yes, it's a family restaurant. My niece and her husband own it. We come here quite often. The lamb is amazing. I always have the lamb." She'd actually had the chicken, but I found it quietly funny now. After dinner, we left through the side exit. Standing at the car, I could see my mother's table through the window. Ryan had his arms crossed, deep in thought. Olivia was looking at her phone. My mother turned and saw me. For a moment, we looked at each other across the distance and all the years. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out. I nodded and got in the car. The next morning, Ryan called. I let the phone ring twice before answering. He said he didn't know the vintage bistro was Ethan's. He asked if I'd planned it. I said no, that my mother had. He also told me that my mother had cried for about an hour after I left. He asked if I was okay, and I said I was fine. He then mentioned that Olivia was having a reflective morning. I told him I didn't want to talk about them right now. He also said that Ethan had called him the night before, asking if he wanted Ethan to comp my mother's check as a birthday gesture. Ryan said Ethan would think about it. We both laughed, the first real laugh we'd had just between the two of us. My mother called that afternoon. She started talking about the weather, which told me she was unsure how to approach the topic. She then tried to explain the seating as a misunderstanding, saying Olivia had handled the reservation and there was a communication issue. I told her I knew she believed what she was saying, and that I loved her. I wished her a good week and a happy birthday. A few days later, Ethan made dinner at home. He cooked a simple but delicious spaghetti carbonara. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd received the text. I thought about the extension table at my mother's and the chair at the restaurant. Looking at my own chair, I realized it was truly mine. I'd stopped waiting for someone else to give me a seat and had created my own. I've learned that the difference between tolerating a seat and choosing one is profound. For most of my life, I'd been trying to fit into a place that was never meant for me. But now, I've decided to stop performing for an audience that never really saw me. Walking away from that unfit seat isn't a loss, it's the first step towards building a table of my own.